Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you here. I see that YouTube has been delaying my broadcast. It's very frustrating, but I'm glad that you're on board, and we are going to be talking about this incident in Baltimore with the Francis Scott Key Bridge. So many of you have been emailing me, texting me, sending me links and videos, and I've been doing some deep digging. And I probably will have a second video for you with some unanswered questions. And you know that they will never be answered, just like the questions about what happened on October 7th in the Big I. Yes, over there in the Middle East, the Big I. We will never get answers as to why they were so woefully unprepared to defend themselves in this surprise attack. We will never get answers as to what happened with these very unnatural fires that break out all over the world. And we will never get answers specifically about what happened in Lahaina and who was in charge, who was the incident commander in that fire. And we are never going to get answers about this as well. We are never going to find out who was piloting the ship, who were the names of the survivors. And if that does come out, it will probably be buried with other news. What I want to bring to you, out of all of the information that I've been scouring over this last many hours since this incident occurred, is I've got a story for you that comes out of England. And this is the Telegraph. And it actually, the story comes out of England. I have to find out whether or not the expert is from England. But let me show this to you. I will leave a link for you in my Substack. And then I'm going to read to you this expert's overview and insight, because I find it very interesting. And I've not seen anyone else cover this. I am going to share my screen. We'll take a look at this. And it is from the Telegraph. The author is Tom Sharp. This is published today, March 27th. I am streaming live. And ideally, YouTube will allow my live stream to go forward without throttling it too much. The title is, "It used to be my job to drive ships under bridges. Things do go wrong." Now, I will say that I'm not going to present this as 100% true. I'm going to share with you what this individual says, because there's so many interesting points about this that I didn't know. Now, I live in an area that doesn't have a lot of bridges with big ships going under it. Maybe that is the same for you. So I've learned a lot about how these ships maneuver, some of the maritime laws. And then I also, stick with me until the end, because I want to debunk some of the myths that are coming out and the misinformation as well. All right. So let me just share with you the information. And again, this is the individual that is an expert in captaining ships under bridges. And he said, actually, yes, at midnight plus 30 local time, so at 1:30 a.m., the container ship Dally left the port of Baltimore, did a tug-assisted turn, and started her passage out to sea. And in fact, I will show you this image once more in case you missed it. Some people didn't realize that the ship was actually leaving the port, and they thought that it was entering. So here is the container ship Dally's route, leaving here. Here is the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and it was leaving this port, and that's where the incident occurred. So I will have a link for you again in my Substack. So he goes on to say, the tug, they did have a tug assisting it, because many people said, where was the tugboat? And the tugs were then detached so they could proceed to their next job and to allow the Dally to safely increase speed. 2 Baltimore harbor pilots. All right, this is where I'm going to stop for a moment in his story. What are their names? This is the major leading story in our current events, and we don't have the names of the Baltimore harbor pilots. Are they being investigated? Were they drunk? Were they inept? I did do some digging, and in another story, I found out that one of the pilots is a rookie, is an apprentice, has only been on the job for a month. So, and that's in a separate story that I will bring for you. But why is there not a name? Now, back in the day, I used to be a freelance writer, and I wrote on health and fitness for many of the major magazines that are on news shelves. I don't even know if they still are in print. And when I wrote my stories, I would have to have at least 2 different experts that I would interview. And after I submitted my story to the story editor, to the editor of the magazine, there would be a copy fact checker, and the fact checker would actually call my experts to make sure that their names were spelled correctly, that I had gotten the quotes correctly, and they basically checked all of my work before the article was published. Now, there will be those, maybe even in my Healthy American audience, who will say, now, Peggy, this is an emergency. We don't have time to check all that information. It has to be published immediately. Well, you know that there are 2 Baltimore harbor pilots, but you don't have their names? That seems like a very rudimentary and, dare I say, essential piece of the puzzle. Don't you agree? So the story just goes on to, his expert analysis goes on to say, 2 Baltimore harbor pilots, experts in navigating ships in confined waters and hugely knowledgeable about doing so. Excuse me, I just mentioned that one of them was an apprentice. I wouldn't say that somebody on the job for 4 weeks is hugely knowledgeable about doing so, would you? All right. Hugely knowledgeable about doing so in Baltimore Harbor specifically remained on board. I have to interrupt the story once more because I also found out, again, this is going to be a separate video that I'll do for you, where these harbor pilots don't necessarily pilot the boat themselves. It says sometimes they go on board and they exchange like a coffee mug with the name of the ship on it or pins or something. They are assisting or advising in the navigation of the waters, but they don't necessarily take the helm. So I found that to be very interesting, and it was also left out of this expert's analysis. I continue with his story. The 2 Baltimore harbor pilots, experts in navigating ships in confined waters, and hugely knowledgeable about doing so in the Baltimore Harbor specifically, remained on board. So far, so normal, an evolution that takes place 1,000 times a day around the world, normally without drama and always unnoticed. However, just an hour later, the Dolly suffered what maritime accident investigators call a loss of control and hit a support pillar of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which subsequently collapsed, resulting in tragic loss of life. If you're just hopping on, I'm reading a story from the UK, from the Telegraph, and this author, Tom Sharp, said that he had a job of driving ships under bridges and that sometimes things go wrong. Okay. He goes on to say, as ever with maritime incidents in the early stages, there is much information missing which will emerge over time as investigations are completed. That's another thing, my own commentary, that they are saying, well, this is under investigation. We can't say anything yet. That is another way of sidestepping the facts and actually fueling all of the information or misinformation and the hoopla surrounding all of this. I think it would be much better to give the facts as they emerge instead of saying we have to wait until the investigation is complete. All right, he goes on to say, I'll try to keep this to what we know and to make it clear if I'm filling in gaps based on my long experience of handling ships. Regarding that experience, I commanded 4 different ships during my 27-year seagoing career, one of which almost sank under me, not due to a collision. Just for extra backup, I have consulted other people I know in writing this article. Even the Telegraph editor handling this piece has experienced a loss of control when handling a ship passing through bridges. In his case, the Forth Bridges of Scotland, fortunately without any collision. Both of us had had slightly tense experience of conning ships through London's Tower Bridge. One thing that the emerging videos and reports of this incident make clear is that on approaching the bridge, the Dolly suffered a loss of electrical power, indicated by all the internal and upper deck lights going out. This is a horrible thing to happen at the best of times. Everything goes dark under the bridge. On the bridge, radars, radios, and any number of little lights, all dimmed to keep your night vision, all simultaneously go out. The constant hiss of the air conditioning, which you never notice previously, becomes deafening in the silence. Then the alarms start. Alarm panels on the battery backup flash into life, and all start beeping to tell you something is wrong. These need to be canceled so you can hear yourself think. Now, there's another piece of this puzzle that I find very concerning, is that according to maritime law, these container ships have to have at least one backup source of propulsion. So that would be a generator or something else. So why didn't that kick in? All right. The author goes on to say, you need to quickly assess what systems you have available. One of the problems with dropping the plant, he has that in quotation marks, and I don't know what that means exactly other than the power going out, is that the resultant equipment failures are never the same. Have you lost propulsion? If no, do you still have control over your ship or the propulsion? Or can you switch over to the backup systems? Critically, do you have control over the rudder? And if not, what angle is the rudder stuck at? While you work this out, you must ask, are you navigationally safe? And if not, how long have you got? A total electrical failure, which is a TLF, happens when whatever is producing your power trips out. All right, I'm going to show you the picture that they've included in this story. And the other thing that I find interesting is that the FAA said that there is going to be nobody is going to be allowed to fly over this area other than the recovery helicopters. So I'm wondering where this image came from. And it's interesting to me in this day and age of all of social media that we do not see any of the information being broadcast by anybody that was on the ship. Did anybody take images? Are there any pictures? Are there any selfies? Is there any information? Are they all hands on deck? Were they unable to do that? I find it very strange that even, I don't know, somebody in another boat wasn't able to take a movie, a little video as they were driving by. All we are really seeing are these very far away images. I find that very interesting. So it says an aerial view of the Dolly cargo vessel, which crashed into the Francis Scott Key Bridge, causing it to collapse in Baltimore, Maryland on March 26, which was yesterday at the time of this recording. Moving ships through bridges is an enterprise fraught with peril. All right, let me continue with the story. So he goes on to say, a total electrical failure happens when whatever is producing your power trips out. There is always redundancy, meaning there's always backup power, especially when operating in confined waters. But the surge in load on those secondary systems can cause them to trip as well. It can also happen when the switchboard or whatever you have in place to manage that power itself trips. There are lots of variations with this. The point being that the order in which it happens determines what systems you lose along the way. And in those first few seconds, you don't know. In this case, the Dolly lost control and started being set to starboard, which is the right side as you're looking forward on the ship, because either the rudder was stuck in that direction or by the wind, which was 10 knots on her port beam, which was the left side, or by the current, right? The ocean current, which was unknown at that time, but it could be significant. On realizing this was going to take them out of the navigable channel and without knowing how long it would take to recover, because the lights went out a second time, indicating that all was still not well, the bridge team would have had no option but to try and slow the ship. They're not talking about, I don't think they're talking about the bridge that you drive on. They're talking about the people at the bridge, the navigators, the pilots. They would have had no option but to try and slow the ship by coming hard astern. Now, if we have any pilots, any captains, anyone knowledgeable in the seafaring vocabulary and information, please drop a comment and also email me, support@thehealthyamerican.org. I would like to know more expert opinion. Okay, this one goes on to say, this could account for the black smoke coming from the funnel, although it's just likely to have been from an emergency generator kicking in. The way the ship shears toward the pillar toward the end suggests that she was going hard astern. Single screw ships react differently under astern propulsion and can swing sometimes dramatically. Stopping distances in ships of that size is significant. That ship is 300 meters long. It's able to carry almost 10,000 20-foot containers. So he says the Dolly is large, but it's not a monster. There are container ships of over 400 meters and over 20,000 20-foot containers. So twice the amount of the containing of what the container ship is bringing. Either way, on realizing that they weren't stopping in time, the ship's master let go the port anchor. Who is the ship's master? All right, there's something, this is my own commentary now. There's something floating around on social media that they're Ukrainian or Russian, but none of that has been proven. I'm not getting any verification of that evidence. By the way, I'm not getting any verification. In fact, it's been disputed and also debunked that this ship is owned by Angela Chow, who is the sister of Elaine Chow, who used to be the secretary of the Department of Transportation under Trump and is also married to McConnell. So there's a lot of interesting things going on. But as it turns out, Angela Chow, who sadly perished in a Tesla because apparently she thought she didn't know how to work the controls and she went backward into a pond and was there and drowned. She was the CEO of a shipping company that does not own this container ship. Having said that, I saw a comment on social media from somebody knowledgeable in the area who said that a lot of these flags that are being flown on these ships are done so out of convenience. And there would take a lot of deep digging to find out who actually owns this container ship, who it was leased to, and it probably is under a lot of layers of secrecy, or privacy is probably a better word. So again, this information may or probably is still going to come out. All right. What they did with the anchor is still unknown, as the anchor was lost in the collision. While doing all of this, a Mayday call was issued. Now, let me know if any of you heard the Mayday call. I have not actually heard, like a 911 call. All I saw was that a Mayday alert as ship drifts towards Baltimore Bridge saved many lives. Joe Biden and the Maryland governor, this is separate from the story I'm reading you, praise heroes in the night whose actions meant motorists heading for the crossing were spared from disaster. So let me show you another image here as well. And I'm adding additional commentary to this expert's article just to flesh out what I know so far. So here it is. As the sun rose, the extent of the damage caused to the Francis Scott Key Bridge became clearer. I mean, that just looks, I don't know. When I very first saw this, again, to me, it's like, is this orchestrated? Because the image just looks like too good to be true in a strange way of saying that, meaning how were they there to capture that? And it's so clear. Anyway, I will talk a little bit more about that. We never heard of any of the names of the crew members. I never heard the Mayday call. Shouldn't that be released for us to hear? I think that would be very important. So let me go on with the captain, who says that he used to captain ships under these bridges. He said a Mayday call was issued indicating an incident with risk to life is imminent, alerting the harbor authorities that the Dolly had lost control and that a collision with the bridge was possible. This quick thinking allowed traffic to be stopped from heading onto the bridge and likely saved many lives. So I want to stop there for just a moment. So a Mayday call was issued. Who issued it and who received it? And at what time was that issued and received? And what exactly did they say? None of that is included in any of the stories that I have scoured, for the last going on 24 hours, I suppose, or, once this incident started, I've been looking at all of the links and information that you're sending me. Who were the harbor authorities? And it's wonderful that they were able to stop the traffic from heading onto the bridge, but who exactly did that? And how long before the collision did that happen? All right, I'm going back to his story now. Many have asked why the tugs weren't used. This is an important point, but a moment ago, he said the tugs were used. This is an important point and points to broader questions that will be asked of the Baltimore Port Control about their overall safety management system, something that is every bit as relevant to this accident, as he calls it, I'm calling it an incident, as the loss of control suffered on the ship. Dolly was doing about 8 knots at the time of the incident, which is approaching the upper speed of most tugs. Now, I will tell you, because I like to look at the numbers, I do see 8 and 80 and 80,000 be repeated again and again and again in many of these stories. So I just wanted to make that note. It could be completely a coincidence, or it could mean something more. Certainly the upper speed at which they can have any lateral effect on a ship of this size. So a tug forward pushing off in the traditional sense would have struggled. But there is no reason other than time or money why she couldn't have had a tug attached aft or at least one close by. This would have given the ship so many more options. She also had a bow thruster, and these are only effective at slow speed, and that assumes if they are working at all. In this case, given how much it failed, it's likely that Dolly's bow thruster was not. When accidents like this happen, it is rarely caused by a single issue. That the ship suffered a loss of control is clear, and I have had a go at describing it, how that might have happened. But when you zoom out, we have reports that there were engineering difficulties on board, including dirty fuel, which will now be investigated. Then we have the tug management issue. This ship with a questionable engineering state was navigating a narrow channel at night under a bridge, which is clear to everyone now, had zero resilience, meaning the bridge went down very easily. Who was adding all of these together and evaluating how the port safety resources should be managed, or were they just treating this like every other movement? The investigation will now look at all of these lessons. We'll look at all of this, so now lessons can be learned and culpability assigned if appropriate. In the past, major investigations like this have been conducted by multiple agencies, some of whom come on with an agenda. These are his words. This will need to be avoided. My overall assessment is that this was a tragic maritime accident. Those pointing to a cyber attack or terrorism should stand down. Again, these are not my comments. This is from the captain who used to steer the boats under bridges. These types of accidents are also far from unprecedented. A report in 2018 cataloged 35 bridge collapses caused by boat strikes between 1960 and 2015. Okay. Help me with the math, but that's like over 50 years, right? It's a function of the complexity and harshness of life at sea. When you need power most, you're most likely not to have it. Every mariner seeing this incident will recall when something similar happened to them, and by the grace of God, they got away with it. But that is no excuse. Maritime transport infrastructure must be resilient. Now, there's one of our New World Disorder words. Seaborne trade is our lifeblood. Freedom of navigation is a basic human requirement, and whilst the expression tends to be used in the context of those who wish to deny it, this incident makes it clear that it is equally applicable far away from those adversaries. Anyway, he finishes up by saying, if we are to honor those who died and those who have yet to be found in this horrific accident, then the global maritime and transport community will need to find out the facts and learn from them as quickly as possible. All right. That is, I thought, very interesting in terms of his experience being a captain. I want to bring you a second video about how these pilots, the harbor pilots, help the master captain, if I'm using the right word, on these ships actually navigate getting in and out of these ports. But I do have a couple of, actually, let me do another video because I do have some questions that need to be answered. And it just doesn't add up. So stick with me. Let me do a second video called Connecting the Clots. That's how I say it. And I'm going to be looking at your comments as well. And there are several things that are very concerning to me. Let me finish up by saying this. When I am investigating and analyzing and digging deeper and reading between the lies on incidents that are presented to us, I usually can drill down to about 4 possible scenarios. Number 1, it's exactly as we're told. These images are accurate. There's no funny business. It was an accident, and we pray for those lives lost, and we hope that there will not be any further accidents in the future. In other words, believe what you see what you believe, listen to the media, don't question it. It's exactly as we're shown and told. That is one possibility. Remote as it may be, it is a possibility. A second possibility, also as remote as it may be, or is it, that kind of the opposite is extreme is it didn't happen at all. This is all CGI, it's all AI. Hey, whatever happened to CGI? Are we just calling it AI now? Am I a little behind the times? Anyway, AI, as my husband says, if Biden is a robot, AI has a long way to go. So this all could be AI. It all could have been staged. None of that could have happened. The bridge is still standing. I mean, that could be a little far-fetched. I'm not in Baltimore. I'm not an eyewitness to all of this, but there are some who have gone to the opposite end of it happened exactly as we're shown to it didn't happen at all. So I suppose it is a possibility as remote as it may be. All right. A third possibility is that it was orchestrated. It was created. It happened intentionally, whether through terrorism or what is known as a false flag, meaning the people that it happened to, or a better way of describing it is that an event actually happened to serve a different purpose. That would be a false flag. A psyop is a little bit different in that it makes it appear as though it happened, but it didn't really. In other words, no one perished. There were no victims. That would be, in my definition of a psyop, more along the lines of it didn't really happen the way we're shown. Another possibility, and this is where I fall on this one with my limited digging that I've done so far, and that is it's likely that an incident occurred, and then the powers that shouldn't be, the evil doers, the New World Disorder, the WEFers, the bad guys, the puppet masters, all of those, the controllers, they will use it to their advantage, perhaps even nudged it a little bit into occurring. So those are the four possibilities that I see. Let me know if I'm missing any. It happened just as we're told. It didn't happen at all. It happened as a false flag or a psyop, or it happened, but maybe we're not going to be told everything. And it certainly is going to be used for, as even this author said, for other agendas. I did a little bit of digging into the international maritime organizations, and they also say that they are going to be moving toward, sustainable green energy on these ships that basically burn diesel, and they burn tons of it, gallons of it, tons of it. And I find that kind of interesting that they are on board with the, New World Disorder mantra of going green. All right. Let me do a second video for you. I've got several questions that have not been answered, and I would like to know if you have answers to these as well, and any additional questions that you can add into the mix. Thanks for being on board, everybody. Get on the free Substack, peggyhall.substack.com. I will have a link to this article that I read. I thought it was very interesting, and I didn't see anybody covering it from that angle. So stick with me, and we'll continue this coverage on this very distressing event. All right. Thanks.